The NFL Draft 23 days away. We'll get into some draft conversation, Eagles, and everything with 97.3 ESPN.com. Sports Illustrated, Eagles, and NFL Insider John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as we close in on the draft. A lot of football conversation. Good stuff on Tom Brady yesterday. John, we know that the Eagles – I want to start with the Eagles draft situation and ask you this. Do you believe there's any scenario that Howie Roseman would give up draft assets to move up in the draft for one of these wide receivers if he deems, you know what, I strongly feel, because everybody feels that they are going to be just outside those top three guys, and that those top three guys are the best three, and then there's a little bit of a dip, not a huge dip. So would he give up draft capital to move up if he said, I really believe one of those three guys is better than the fourth guy?
Yeah, he's always willing to do that. And I kind of said, I mean, that's how he doesn't want to do it, but sometimes he can't help himself. I think that's what happened last year, to be honest. And even 2 years ago, when they moved back up after moving down to get Dallas Goedert, in a lot of circumstances, he just can't help himself when he likes a player. He goes up and he gets them. So a couple things would have to happen. One, obviously, you would have to like the player, assuming one of the receivers starts to slip a little bit. And how far would that slippage have to occur? It would almost have to be 15, maybe even a little bit further, 16, 17, certainly 18. Then at that point, I think he would say, okay, let's go do it, even though he really wouldn't want to do it and he can't help himself. But I think as he goes into the process, as we stand here today, in fact, I know from talking to him, that is not the plan.
That is not a plan.
No, it's not the plan. But as I said, sometimes he can't help himself. He has said consistently, we need draft picks, we need bodies, we need to get younger, we need to get more cost effective now that Carson Wentz is in his second contract. So he understands that, he verbalizes it, he says it consistently. Can he be disciplined enough to do that if somebody starts to fall? I don't know. That's the part I don't know.
Okay, that's an interesting scenario. So do you think that there is a divide between the top three and then the fourth guy that is worth moving up for?
Depends how high you have to move up. If you're talking about moving up to 12, no, I don't think the divide is that great. If one of the guys starts to slip, as I said, to 17, 18 in that range, then I think you're discussing. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think any of them are going to fall that far. But we'll see. You never know. Certain teams obviously have issues at other positions, and we always talk about quarterbacks getting pushed up the board most notably. But it happens at other positions as well. If you look at the draft board as a whole, the position most likely to help the Eagles would be offensive tackle. There's a lot of tackles projected to be first-round picks, a lot of teams that need offensive tackles. If all of a sudden there's a run on those guys and the receivers start to fall a little bit, that's when you start to raise your antenna and perk up a little bit.
Obviously, you tweeted out earlier something that's interesting, that when NFL GMs say best player available, what they really mean is best player available at the position we could use some help at. I don't know that fans look at it that way. When they say best player available, it to them typically means, hey, if the best guy at 21 is a left tackle, you take the left tackle.
Yeah, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. They won't admit it publicly. And I even got that. Well, the Eagles might. I said, someone tweeted me back and said the Eagles aren't taking a certain position. I said, well, you can add. They're certainly not taking a quarterback. If the quarterback's the best player on the board, they're not taking a quarterback. They're not taking a defensive tackle after signing Javon Hargrave. They're not going to do it. They got too much money tied up in Fletcher Cox, Malik Jackson, Javon Hargrave. They can't do it. They can't allocate the assets at that position. So if there is a defensive tackle, for instance, that falls to 21, that's a good player, they're not taking him. Simple as that. And if he's the best player on the board, they'll just trade out.
Now, yeah, go ahead.
That's just how it works.
Yeah.
It's best player available at a position of need. That's real life of what they're saying.
All right. So at 21, what are the realistic positions of need? Which 21 positions of need are different from round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, right?
Yeah. As you get down later in the draft, it should always be the best player on your board. So really, when you're talking about premium picks, first, second, third, you have to fill certain needs. And there are certain positions that every team in this league has to address. And then as you get later and deeper into the draft, if you see somebody on the board that's falling a little bit that you don't necessarily need, but you like them, that's when you take truly the best player available. It's just you have to, and it's not a hard and fast rule to say you have to fill needs, because there are organizations that are very disciplined from that standpoint. It's a word I used before, and understand. Look, if you start wildly reaching for a player just because you're badly in need of a player at that position, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But everybody in this league can improve at a lot of positions. So generally, when we talk about the Eagles at 21, yeah, most likely it's a wide receiver. I got news for you. They could still use a safety. They certainly need a linebacker. We all know that. You could argue they still need a corner.
Yeah.
They need an offensive lineman, backup offensive lineman now. They need a running back. They're obviously not going to value that at 21, but there's a lot of positions of need, so it's not like you have trouble with the board usually, and that's any NFL team, not just the Eagles.
Yeah. Well, okay, so linebacker, when does that start to come in play? Is that a second round area where you're like, okay, I feel second round is where linebacker starts to come into play?
Yeah, I would think. I mean, there are some, and it's Daniel Jeremiah fueled, because in his most recent mock draft, he actually switched to the Eagles, taking the linebacker. Hey, they haven't done it since 1979. An all-fall linebacker. They took Marcus Smith during the Chip Kelly era, but that essentially was an edge rusher. Remember, at the time, they were playing 3-4, so really that was an edge player. That's not a true linebacker. They haven't taken a true linebacker, as I said, in 40 years in the first round. Now, you can say that, and it's true, and it's Jerry Robinson, and everybody knows that, but Howie Roseman also hasn't been around for those entire 40 years, so I don't know how much that means. But it's pretty evident that not only this organization, but the league as a whole does not value that position as much as it once did. So you put that into the equation, and you put into the equation that the Eagles haven't exactly earmarked a lot of assets over the years, and I find it very hard to believe that they would take a linebacker at number 21 overall.
I would agree with you.
Most people would. Now,
are you getting pushback on that?
Well, look at the depth chart. That's why Jeremiah did it. I mean, they have the work, and I've mentioned this on the show in the past. As we stand here right now, and it doesn't matter. I mean, it's April. But as we stand here right now, you can look at all 32 teams in this league. Nobody is worse off at the linebacker position than the Eagles. They have nothing. They have nothing. Their best linebacker is Nate Gary. Their best linebacker. That is untenable. So they got to get somebody somewhere. To me, it has to start. You have to start thinking about it seriously in the second round. No question.
Yeah. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, football at 4. Johnny Mack's here. All right. So wide receiver, corner, safety. Is safety a spot in round one? Corner a spot in round one? Safety, corner. Do they feel that those are two? I mean, I guess corner would have to be on the list, right?
Yeah, it should be. No. I mean, people act like Avonte Maddox is a given. Avonte Maddox isn't a given as a starting outside corner in this league, and nor is any of the safeties. You know, you can talk about Rodney McLeod and Jalen Mills and Will Parks all you want. You can project, but if there's a star safety, but again, we talk about value. We talk about the Eagles' history. They generally don't like to take safeties that high in the draft. Corner, to me, is a more valued position, so that would be more likely. But, yeah, both of those positions. One of my favorite stories is when I covered the Vikings and they drafted Adrian Peterson, who was the seventh pick in the draft. And I was talking to somebody from that organization, and a lot of people don't remember him, but they had a running back by the name of Chester Taylor, who was a really, really good back. And he was a year off having a 1,200-yard rushing season.
Toledo?
Yeah. And he was a good receiver out of the backfield. Just a really, really good all-around back. Not great, but really good. And I asked, you're really thinking about taking Adrian Peterson? And I said, what about Chester Taylor? And the quote, one of the great quotes of all time, F Chester Taylor. In other words, and he wasn't trying to downgrade Chester Taylor because they thought he was a very good player. But the point is they thought they had a generational player, and they turned out to be right. And that's the point. If you have a great player, F Avonte Maddox, F Jalen Mills. If you have a great player, go get the great player. No offense to those guys.
Well, yeah, and part of the problem is the Eagles don't have a great player. They have guys, and it's like the notion of like a pitching staff. Well, I got a bunch of number 2s and 3s, but I don't have an ace. I think the Eagles last year, we was like, they got a bunch of 2s and 3s. They got a lot of them. That didn't pan out. Now you're almost like they got a lot of 3s and 4s or 4s and 5s.
Well, exactly, and that's why and that's what I was trying to impart from that story. It's like, you can say, you don't have to hand wring over average to above average players. If you can improve, you improve. It's not to say, it's not trying to downgrade or trying to dismiss players like Maddox, like Mills. They can help you win. But if you can get better, if the board falls that way, and the best player there is a corner, or the best player there on your board is a safety, you go get that player. You don't worry about slightly above average players or average players. And I think too many fans hand-wring over stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You let the chips fall where they may.
Well, that's that's the conundrum that comes where it's like, well, we could get by with Jalen Mills and this guy. Don't waste a pick on that high on that position because we can get by with these guys.
Yeah, and I understand that thought process, but the worst thing you want to do as an organization is pass a player you think is going to be really, really good, and using that sentiment, saying, well, we can get by. We think this guy's really, really good and much better than the wide receiver, but we really, really need the wide receiver.
Yeah.
And that's where I said that's where the best player comes in, but it's the best player at positions where you would need help. And just because you think an average player might be better than he really is, organizations can't think that way.
Yeah, the offensive line thing that you brought up is also interesting to me because I agree with you. They lost Vaitai, who people don't like, but they won a Super Bowl with him starting at left tackle. When he knew he was starting, he gave you very good games. You know, when you threw him in the middle of the game, yeah, he did not play his best. But I think you're going to find out that that's going to be a tough spot to replace if you have an injury where you had an old faithful kind of guy that you can just rely on. If Lane Johnson goes down or Andre Dillard goes down, there's a spot where they're going in with somebody almost green as grass now.
Yeah, they are. I don't think, though, you can look at, say, swing tackle and say, look, we can take a first-round tackle. And by the way, there are a lot of tackles available, and there's probably going to be somebody at 21 valuable enough to take at that spot. But I just think you're locked in. You have maybe the best right tackle in football, and you just took a left tackle in the first round. You can't take another tackle in the first round of the draft. That's another perfect example of what I'm talking about. You just can't do it. You have to look for a swing tackle, which is a very important role, but it is a luxury. And I agree with you. Vaitai was far more valuable than most people gave him credit for. But, you know, he was a fifth-round pick. That's where you got to get players like that, and you got to develop them. You can't take a first-round pick and say, this is going to be my swing tackle.
Also, I mean, what's your take on the guard situation? I mean, I think this is a very intriguing scenario that's coming up if I'm Howie Roseman, okay? I got Jason Kelce, my center, who I don't know how many more years he's giving me. My left guard is probably, John, would you agree, the heir apparent to be my center. And I got a right guard who's coming off of major injuries the last couple of years, yet is very good when he plays. So do you look to add guard depth and or a replacement for Kelce, or is Seumalo your replacement for Kelce, and then you got to find a replacement for him at some point soon?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I consider Seumalo very comparable to Lane Johnson, not as a player, but because Lane is a superstar.
You mean
player,
like, hey, he's going to be the heir apparent at left tackle, but he's played right tackle so long, we're just going to keep him there?
Exactly. And that might happen with Seumalo. I'm not saying it is. It's still too early in the process. But the longer Jason decides to play, and he said pretty consistently now, it's a year-by-year proposition for him. So you do have to think about the future. And right now, yes, the future would be Seumalo kicking over and playing center. And the Eagles have said since they drafted him, that's his most natural position. They feel it's his most natural position. They feel that's what he would be best at. But the longer he plays at left guard, and the longer he plays pretty well at left guard, they may consider leaving him there. And then you start thinking about getting the heir apparent and drafting him. And, yeah, I do think at some point the Eagles are going to draft an interior offensive lineman because they want an interior backup. They have Nate Herbig, who people don't know, but they started cross-training him at center last year as a rookie. But he's really young. Generally, those guys, it's basically Stefan Wisniewski. That's the type of player they want, a guy who can go into all three of those interior positions and play them kind of seamlessly. But those guys are not easy to find, and they're generally veterans. Generally, young players can't handle that kind of role. So I'm not sure the Eagles are going to be able to get to where they're very, very comfortable with an interior backup because it's tough to find those guys.
Yeah, and these are typically, you're looking in the 5th, 6th round for those type of guys.
Yeah, and
we're not talking about 21 for the people out there screaming at their radio going,
no,
you're not drafting an interior backup with 21. No, we're talking about 5th, 6th round.
No.
Well, sometimes you got to be clear and speak slow.
Yeah, you got to be very clear and speak very slow. But even if somebody like Nick Harris, because that's a guy, a lot of people have compared him from a movement standpoint to Kelce. If he falls a little bit, say to the 4th round, I could see them making a move on a player like that as the potential heir down the road. So I think they'll consider it. But, yeah, certainly, no. If anybody's thinking of 21, I just got it. You can't set it at swing tackle. You can't draft a backup swing tackle at 21 overall. Anytime you have a first-round pick, you want that guy to contribute right away.
Do you believe they will draft a quarterback in any round of this draft?
It's a possibility. It's always a possibility. I mean, Howie's on record saying he likes to draft a quarterback every 2 years at least. And last year they drafted Clayton Thorson, but it didn't work out.
Cut,
He didn't
right.
make the team. So
You got to double up now.
if they like a developmental quarterback late, and you look at what Doug has traditionally liked. I mean, you look at Carson Wentz, you look at Nick Foles, 6'5", 6'6", Nate Sudfeld, 6'6", Josh McCown, 6'4". He likes a big, strong pocket passer, and that's why I looked at James Morgan as a potential late-round pick for the Eagles.
All right, Johnny Mack, Football at 4, at JF McMullen. Man, I feel like we just go down. This is like a YouTube thing. We just go down a rabbit hole of draft conversation, and I do preparation for this segment, John. I have all these topics listed here. I wanted to get into Tua, the fact that I guess we got a couple minutes for this. Tua has been red flagged by a couple of teams at the top, right? I mean, do you anticipate that is the biggest story April 23rd?
I think right now it's teams that are interested in Tua trying to get out this information, so teams are scared off.
So they're going to red flag him yet draft him?
Well, they're saying they have concerns. They're not going to red flag him. They're trying to get out, because the assumption is in Detroit, and you've seen all the stories about the Lions are open for business. Mm-hmm. About trading down. Everybody who's thinking about trading up is thinking about going up to get to it. So that's what this is all about. So everybody trying to wrangle is kind of and even Washington has played this game a little bit. Everybody in this league knows the Redskins are going to take Chase Young, who's the best player in this draft, and by the way, that could be a nightmare for the Eagles twice a year for years and years to come. I mean, that kid is legit. Everybody I've talked to said, if anything, he's better than Nick Bosa, and look what he did for the 49ers last year. So he's going to be a concern. But everybody's playing this game because they want somebody to trade up, give them a Brinks truck of assets in return, and then the teams that want to are trying to say, oh, maybe he's not healthy. So there's, you try to scare people off. We're 2 weeks until the NFL draft. Don't believe anything at this point, because everybody is trying to spread disinformation.
All right, we have information. We'll continue to give it to you. The NFL Draft, April 23rd, and you can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. It'll be zoomed to you, I'm assuming, somehow. That's the way they'll get it out to our listeners. I'm assuming. I don't know. I don't know where the radio broadcast fits on the level of, like, all these different broadcast situations. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure it'll be easier to do the radio part, so I'm sure they'll have no problem with that. But yeah, hopefully they can get something done. I think their $15 billion could get Zoom to give them a dedicated channel that people can't hack.
Yeah, as we discussed on yesterday's show. All right, John, we'll talk to you tomorrow, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Johnny Mack, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We'll do it again. And, of course, the NFL Draft, April 23rd, right here on 97.3 ESPN.